This is the Mindset Game podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. And on today's show, I've got Jarryd Wallace. Jarryd is a two-time Paralympian, having competed in London 2012 and Rio 2016 in the T44 classification. So welcome on the show, Jarryd.
Thanks, James. Glad to be here, man.
Obviously, I was looking at your bio on your website, and you say you're not your typical high school track athlete turned professional athlete. So obviously, you were diagnosed with compartment syndrome, and you were a track athlete before having your amputation. Talk to us a little bit what kind of mindset that put you in, obviously having to deal with those circumstances.
Yeah, I think most 17-year-old kids have somewhat of a picture of what their next 4 to 6 years are going to look like going off into college. For me, it was competing on a collegiate athletic team and, having a good time and not really having to worry about a whole lot, go through the college deal and then maybe have an opportunity to run professionally. That's kind of what the next path looked like for me. And in my senior year, getting diagnosed with compartment syndrome and then, finding myself not only not running, but not being able to walk, my life kind of got flipped upside down and, definitely faced a lot of challenges, obvious physical challenges, but, the biggest ones I think were the mental challenges, having to refine my identity. I saw myself as an athlete and that was about it. I can tell you right now, I wasn't going to university on academic scholarships. So, it was one of those things that, I had to kind of reevaluate what my life was going to look like, reevaluate the future. And I spent, the next 2.5 years, I had a bunch of reconstructive surgeries. It's not like, surgery 1, amputation, and I'm, got a prosthetic and I'm back moving around again. I went through 2.5 years of total reconstruction. A lot of limb salvage, was in a lot of pain. I got addicted to pain medication, went down the road of abusing drugs and alcohol and just really, really in a dark place, man. And I think at some point during that season, I really just hit rock bottom and felt like there's got to be more, there's got to be more to life, than where I am right now. And started considering having an elective amputation and meeting with doctors and ultimately came down to the decision that if I wanted to move forward with life, if I wanted to get, be out of pain, I'm going to have to make a radical decision. But it has proven to be a great one.
But in terms of you say, I love this quote that you've got on your website. You say too many people unfortunately allow life changes to define their existence. And you say you never let your disability define you. But talking to you, first of all, it sounds like it kind of did define you a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah, man, no, you're right on. I think that's one of the greatest lessons that I've learned and why I can so confidently say that statement is because I was that person. I was letting my circumstances define me for a while. And it took me to get to rock bottom. It took me to get to a place of really saying, is this really it? There's got to be more, hoping for more, wanting there to be more, and then realizing, what got me here. That yes, there were circumstances outside of my control, but I started making a lot of decisions that weren't allowing me to move forward, that weren't allowing me to evolve into the person that I believe I was created to be. And so, I had to make a radical decision. I had to make a choice that I was no longer going to let the circumstance that I was in define what my future was going to look like. And I believe that that's what led me into a, meeting with a doctor where he looked at me and said, Jarryd, you need to have your leg cut off. And I was able to hear that at 19 years old and see that was actually a good thing. And that would bring hope and it would allow me to dream again and would allow me to, again, not let where I was in that moment dictate what my future looked like, but take that leap of faith and have an second chance at life.
And in terms of kind of big dreams, did you have aspirations of reaching the Paralympic level?
Yeah, that meeting that I had with the doctor when he basically told me you need to have your leg amputated, that was kind of the first time I took it seriously. The first time I started doing some research, and literally, man, about an hour and a half after that meeting, I found myself on a computer Googling Paralympic world records. And I called my parents in and I was like, guys, I'm going to break these things. I'm going to have my name on this list. This is going to be awesome. And, you know, maybe not why I'm going to have my leg amputated, but this is one of my big goals. And I've always been a big goal setter, and, you know, still am to this day. And you know, that was the beginning of this journey for me.
And Jarryd, have you always been an out-and-out sprinter even before your amputation?
No, I was a middle distance to distance runner in my high school career and hopeful collegiate career. So, you know, running the 800, the 15, I went all the way up to the 5K in cross country. That one I did not enjoy nearly as much. But yeah, no, I definitely was a little bit more towards the distance. You know, I split sub 50, 400 meter splits on the 4x4 in high school. So I obviously had foot speed, but it was nothing like what I've had to kind of transition into now. I was still 5'8", but about 115 pounds. I do not know how to transfer that to kilos for you, but I was about 40 pounds, about 20, almost 20 kilos lighter than I am now. And that's just been a big testament to the weightlifting and training and how training has changed and adapted from being a middle distance runner to being a sprinter.
And kind of going on to my next question, I was obviously doing my research and looking at your Wikipedia page and saw that you ran the 400 at the World Champs in 2003 in Lyon, 2013, sorry. Is it kind of how I did the question beforehand? Is it a bit similar story to Usain Bolt as to why you kind of switched from the 400 to go down to the hundreds? Or is your story a little bit different completely?
Yeah, you know, man, it's the money event, man. That's the event that people want to see. Yeah, you know, the 400 hurts a lot more too. So yeah, I think that definitely is part of that. You know, if you look at the competitive field from a T44 standpoint in the Paralympic world, the 100 meters is where it's at. The 200 meters as well is extremely deep, and there's not a lot of guys running the 400. You know, you do have some great athletes doing some great things in the 4, but it's not the sought after event. It's not the one that, you know, is necessarily selling all the tickets and you know, that's the race I want to be part of. And although it's polar opposite to what I grew up around, and although it's, you know, completely different mentality than what I, you know, am used to, you know, I'm transforming myself. I'm taking it as a new challenge, and you know, I'd say I've done a pretty good job at running it and competing in it pretty successfully. So yeah, we're going to continue to pursue that 100, and hopefully I can one of these days get a Paralympic title or a world title under my belt.
And what a lot of people might not know about you is that you say on your website is you've become your nation's fastest amputee, and in fact your speed surpasses that of many NFL running backs. When you say that, do you mean like over the 400 dash then?
No, as far as top speed's concerned, you know, a lot of NFL athletes, a good majority of them have that burst at 10 meters, but, you know, top speed, you know, you could say some of the top receivers and some of the top running backs, you know, maybe you're in a little different league. But if you look at the top speed of myself, of Richard Brown, of Johnny Peacock, you know, our meters per second top speed is equivalent to a lot of the top sprinters in the world. And which would put us as faster than most NFL players in the world. And so, you know, our hindrance is our start and our finish. So because of having a blade, you know, not being asymmetrical out of the blocks, it takes us a little bit longer to get going. But once we're up at our top speed, there's not a lot of athletes, able-bodied or alike, that can run at the speeds that we can run. And I think we've all been on treadmills or force plates that have elicited those numbers and those results.
And in terms of, and then the next question, which I've had somebody answer question for me to ask you, how long did it take you to get used to your running blade in the first instance? And that comes from Hannah Moore.
Yeah, you know, I think the first day I put that thing on, you know, it was like kind of a kid on a bicycle for the first time, you know, where it's like, okay, I know I can do this. I know I can, you know, I've seen it done 100 times over again, but it was unfamiliar. It was something new. And just like anything, you have to trust that the wheels are going to keep turning around, and that it's going to keep propelling you forward. And for me, I had to trust that the blade was going to be there, and that I was going to be able to keep moving forward. Based on people that were there and that have watched tons of amputees run for the first time, they said it was the most natural that they've ever seen. And, I think that that's a testament to my background in running. But it was one of those things that, I literally just had to trust the device. And that became pretty quick and pretty easy for me. The leg that I had for about 3 years before the amputation was so deformed and filled with so much pain that, having something that was not painful, that allowed me to run and be active again, it was kind of like, oh, this is amazing. I was like a kid in a candy store, just taking off and having a blast and looking at all the different options and sizes and things to do. So, I think that my passion and excitement, kind of overcame my mental fear potentially of, well, what if it's not as comfortable? What if it's not the same? And I didn't even look at it as, comparison from what it used to be like to what it was, because I hadn't run for 4 years. I forgot what it was like to be able to run, comfortably and without pain. So, it has become my new normal. And now I can't imagine running with two legs now. It just doesn't,
Bear me 1 second. Somebody at the door, so I'll just pull.
It's just become a normal feeling.
And then in terms because I was fortunate to see Johnny Peacock's running style, like running gait, before, oh God, when this would have been? This is going back before London 2012, and kind of seeing how he's progressed. It's like, because you're looking in, this is like we had a pre-Paralympic camp, I'm going to say 2011, and you're thinking, he had aspirations of obviously Olympic medals. You're thinking, I can't see it from technique-wise, but it's kind of, okay, you've got a drive to get there. So it's kind of seeing, well, how you guys, you can see it, because I did biomechanics at university. It's very fundamental aspect of it, because the quicker you go, is you've got more control over it than, say, the slower ones in the event. So it's kind of, do you feel that, to kind of go on to my next question, being slightly shorter than other guys, do you think you're at a slight disadvantage from, say, a stride length?
I think it comes down to the game of control and the angle that you push out of the block set. Sprinting is not a the cookie cutter sport. It's not, this is exactly how everyone does it, and this is the only way to achieve success in sprinting. And I think Usain Bolt's a great example of how that's the case. What you need to do, and what my coach and I are continually working on, is what's the best way for me to run 100 meters. If you watch the prelims of London 2017 versus the finals of London 2017, I was at 60 meters faster in the finals than I was in the prelims, but the end result of the race was a lot slower and a lot different than what the prelims to the finals was. And a lot of that's a testament to being patient and long and technically sound, and pushing a lot deeper into the race in the prelims, and versus the finals. I was a little anxious, a little rushed at the beginning, and got up and started running a little too soon. So, the 100, as most people, in the sport know, and some people out of sport know, is not necessarily who gets to the line the fastest, but who slows down the slowest. And that's a pretty interesting concept, but, every sprinter is slowing down as they get into the line. And so how can we set up the race best for me to slow down the least at the end of the track? And that's one thing that Johnny has done a really great job of, and some of the other guys. As far as double amputees are concerned, it's a little bit different. They're speeding up all the way through the line, so that's why it looks like that, because they actually are doing that. Definitely for Flores and some of those guys, it's going to look a little bit different. But for able-bodied athletes, and then for single amputees, that's kind of the breakdown of that race. So, I wouldn't say there's more of an advantage to being shorter. I think in a 60-meter race, you could argue and say yes. Our goal, and I know Johnny, and you just look at his running style and his biomechanics, his goal is to take as least amount of steps as possible. He wants to increase that stride length, as do I. There's a diminish of no return where you're overstriding and you're not able to elicit the power necessary to, keep your stability. But, there is that window where, guys like myself, 5'8", Johnny 5'8", 5'9", we're striving towards, hey, let's use our advantage of angles out of the blocks. Let's get that power in the right position, but let's really make sure that we can get up and create some longer strides with the power as we're at our top speed. So yeah, I mean, I think that, again, it allows us to get out pretty quick on some of the other guys, but our focus is not necessarily winning the 30 meters. It's winning at 100 meters. So, it's not a 30-meter race. It's not a 60-meter race. It's a 100-meter race. And so, everyone's trying to figure out how to do that best.
But you say do you think it comes down to a mindset between the prelims and the final, that you have that element of tightness and things? Obviously, I was an athlete, so I can understand that there's certain aspects of, obviously there's more importance on in the final. Obviously, getting to the final, it opens up multiple doors, because in theory any number of 1 to 6 can win the race. You just got to get there. So it kind of, that pressure comes off. But like the tightness that obviously you brought up just before, do you think it's kind of a mental thing to do with the extra pressures that come with a final?
Yeah, I think it was two-part for me there. I went back to kind of my natural tendencies and my natural habit, which is to get choppy and quick out of the blocks, to be really explosive. And, most pictures of me through about 50, 60 meters, I was ahead of Johnny, and then at 60 meters, it continued his acceleration and top speed. He took it a little further down the track. So, part of it was, the nerves got me, away from my race plan and back to my kind of tendencies. And historically, I have been really quick through 30, really quick through 50, and then just tried to hold on. When I'm running against some of the top guys in the world, I can't hold on. When I'm running against other guys that are, still trying to sharpen up their craft, I'm able to hold them off. So, I have been able to get away with, in some regards, not running the most consistent or best races and still having decent performances. But one thing that, my coaches brought into light and that we've learned of this past year is that we have been trying to focus on my strength, which has been my first 30 meters, instead of the rest of the race. And one of the things that we're starting to do now is, hey, we know my start's going to be fast, so let's slow it down, knowing it's still going to be fast. Let's elongate it, knowing it's still going to be fast, and help set up the end half of the race. And that's what we worked a lot of the last half of this year on. And I executed it great in the prelims, and it's just it's such a new mindset that when I got into the finals, when I got into that pressure, the gun went off and I just got a little excited and defaulted back to my, original tendency, which is just get out, go, 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 go. And, at 10 meters, it's one of those races it's really hard to run, because at 10 meters, I knew exactly what happened and I knew exactly what the outcome was going to be like. And so I'm running down the track, holding my breath, hoping someone makes a mistake, because I knew I made a mistake. And, unfortunately wasn't fortunate enough for that to have happened. And, Johnny ran a brilliant race. And he ran the race he needed to run to win.
And this probably moves on to a great point that Josie Wendell asked. Is there anything better than the rush right before the gun sounds? And if there is, what is it?
Yeah, I would say probably not. The reality is, and it's the perfect, like, calm before the storm. If you've ever seen a movie where, people are stuck in a hurricane, all of a sudden it's just peaceful and they're in the eye of the hurricane. It's kind of like that moment where it's just like chaos and hype and excitement, and then it gets just, the whole stadium gets quiet, and they say, on your marks, and you're going through your routine now, and it's this adrenaline rush, but then there's this level of peace and calmness involved, and I believe that piece is necessary to be able to execute, and run well. And then, it's how, for everybody's different, but how long are they going to hold us down there? Then how long are they going to hold us in set? You kind of just have to be used to different transitions and different time frames. so that you could stay composed and when the gun goes off, let it all out.
I think that's a good answer. Yeah, but then how long you're going to be held in the blocks is going to depend very much on the what would be the word, the starters, kind of how they, because then you don't want to be, we don't even want to preempt it now because of the risk of being DQ'd.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough game. Most coaches coach their athletes to be the last person into the blocks. And if that was the case, then no one would get in the blocks and the race would never go off. Um, at some point you gotta get in the blocks. So everyone's kind of doing the routine and they're looking out of their peripheral vision, in the corner of their eyes, going, who's getting in their blocks last? Do I need to extend my time a little bit here? But at the same time, you don't want to be that guy, that's just waiting for everyone to get in the blocks and then start your routine, because someone's going to put a hand up or you're going to get asked to, speed up and all that jazz. So, we respect, I think the athletes all respect each other enough to get in a timely manner. And then really it's just up to, the starter's discretion. Is everyone still? Is everyone making a movement? How long do I want to hold them before we go into set? And those things like that. And that's, that's on every starter's different in that regard. And, that I think that in London and all my races for sure, they were consistent and they were good on that. But it's definitely part of the game. And part of it is a little mind game with some of the athletes, and part of it, you can't let it throw you off of your game plan as well. So, definitely is a cool aspect of sprinting.
I'd have never thought it'd go to that extent of being in the blocks as well. Obviously, you see it from the showmanship, obviously, to the cameras and things like that. But to not, I won't say stoop to that, but you wouldn't think it would go as far as to be even in the blocks. Who wants to be last for the 100 meters to get even that little bit of what would it be? Last bit of one-upmanship on somebody else.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit less of the one up and a little bit more of, you just don't want to be sitting in the blocks for 30 seconds, so you don't want to just rush down and get in the blocks and be ready to go for everyone else, because then you're just sitting there, you're on your hands, you're kind of balanced, your muscles are getting a little anxious and potentially tight and all that. So, there's that mutual respect where you don't want to hold the field up, but there's also that desire of, I really do want to be the last person in, because I don't want to be in that position for very long. I want to be in the position for 2 seconds, set, go, and that's how it is at practice most days, that not your coaches, aren't holding you for 30 seconds down in set, because, you got 10 athletes out there and everyone's trying to get work done. And, you just, you don't fully practice that all the time. So, it's amazing. There's little things that you don't think about, that do actually happen behind the scenes.
But does it come to that nature? Does it come back down to keeping that elasticity in the muscle? And obviously, you want to keep the fibers as explosive as possible. Is that why? Is that kind of mindset that you want to do that?
Yeah, and I think just relax. You're less things to think about. It's a psychology game as well, man. The longer you're down there, the more you're rehearsing through your race. You're trying to keep your mind clear. You're trying to stay relaxed. You just want to execute what you've been prepping. You're going through 1 or 2 cues in your head. The more you spend stagnant time right in a high energy situation, the more potential, you've got things that could go through your head that could distract you. And so again, it's just part of that. You want that time frame to be as concise as possible.
And you talked about, obviously, from your new race plan, you've implemented that this year's World Championships.
Yeah.
Is it that you've got, with your coach and yourself in mind, have you got it that by slowing down your start a little bit, is it to put extra pressure on the other athletes by tweaking that a little bit? Because obviously you can sometimes beat people at the start because they're panicking already because they're behind.
Yeah, I think having that fast start actually causes a little bit more panic than slowing it down a little bit. But what we've noticed, it's really interesting. It's really slowing it down in the sense that I'm finishing every step. When I when I'm rushing or anxious or kind of really quick to 10 meters, what we noticed is I was actually taking shorter steps. I wasn't finishing my push every time. So if I'm getting 85 to 90% out of each leg, versus 100%. So my I kind of over exaggerate the motion. For me, that's kind of how I have to think about it. What we've found is I'm actually faster to 10 meters. I'm actually faster to 30 meters, but I'm using a lot less energy, and I'm getting down to the track in a position, a posture that's going to allow me to hit top speed later in the track and decelerate shorter. So, like I said, we implemented this about halfway through this season. We made the decision about 6 to 7 weeks before London that, hey, let's do this. Let's make this kind of the start, and I was able to do it consistently enough in practice that it seemed like it would be a good choice to make. And then we basically knew, hey, if I default to my old start, it's okay. We're gonna just take what we get and move forward with it and continue to implement it into this next season. And I truly believe if this start, or I don't want to say if and when this start becomes my new start, I'm gonna be a tough guy to beat, on the circuit, because I think it's my one part. I don't set up my race. I've rarely set up my race well, and when I get to the point where I can do that, it's gonna be fun.
But then you talk about it like in that way. It's consistency, but the end game is Tokyo.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, it is, and that's where, you know, a lot of people, kind of have asked me, because I made a blade change this year. We changed up how we trained, just off of some things that we learned. This is my second year with my coach. So we changed up a few things, and then we changed, started working on a different race strategy, both in the 100, and we're kind of beginning to now work into the 200 a little bit as well. And so, people are kind of always like, why are you making changes on such a big year? Why are you always making changes? Like, uh, people, I feel like a tendency is people are afraid of change. And one of the things that I've become to love is change, because I think change elicits an opportunity to learn. Change elicits better performances sometimes. And if it elicits bad performances, you learn from it and eventually have better performances. So, I'm a huge proponent of making changes. I'm a huge proponent of adaptation, even in times where there's big meets going on, because what better place to practice than a big stage? And hey, did it work? Great. What do we do different? All right, let's move forward and continue to make adjustments. So, I think the changes that we made this year were great changes. I think they put us in a great position to, enjoy this, quote unquote, off year from a world championship and really fine tune some of those things. 2019 is going to be a year of perfection, and 2020 is going to be the year of execution.
Well, I think. Do you find that it's people that are outside the sporting sphere that ask you those type of questions, or is it a bit of
Absolutely.
But I think from an athlete perspective, it's better to quote unquote get things wrong now and in a lesser event to a certain degree. I wouldn't knock the world champs completely, but
Hmm.
you want to be peaking, and this probably every athlete would say that, in the Olympic Games, Paralympic Games.
You're absolutely right, man. You know, to discredit or to potentially sound as if it discrediting world championships. I won a bronze and a gold this past year. I mean, what we did it's working. So we changed within our wheelhouse. We're not making changes that are going to cause potential injury or risk of really poor performance. If we would have seen that in the first few weeks, we would go right back to what we were doing before. So although change on the outside seems a lot larger than what it really actually is, between my coach and I and our team. So everything that we do is calculated and it's intentional, and we believe the change that we're going to make is for the better. I think that's the reason people try to change, is because they want to be better, not worse. And so we just have to trust that system and that process. And every now and then you get some athletes that are like, I don't understand, what are you changing? And at that, I'm just like, that's where it's a great opportunity to encourage them and speak into, the importance of change and this and where change leads. And I think that's just a learning process. And every athlete at some point gets to learn that and then gets to apply it.
And then this question might be a little bit controversial. Obviously, with what the IPC has brought in with the rule changes they're looking to implement now going forward, I was a bit baffled a little bit in terms of I could see why they would maybe want to bring in a height limit for the double amputees, but then to go as far as to scrapping every world record till I think it was into the 1970s was a little bit over the top. And it was just to get your take on how which way you see the kind of the movement going in terms of that controversial question.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a proponent, and one of the reasons I haven't run the 200 meters since 2013 in Lyon is because of the combined classes. I think that they've made it harder on themselves just by trying to come up with new systems and trying to come up with new scales to regulate the blades. You know, it can be and should be as simple as just separating categories, and that's how you create the most competitive field. Listen, in 100 meters, yes, is it cool to see someone run from 30 meters behind and potentially win at the line? Maybe for the fans. I'm sure as heck it's not for the athletes. It's a nightmare for an athlete,
Well,
because it's not.
he's coming though, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, it's getting out and making sure that you can hold them off, and in the 200, it's impossible. And so yeah, it's kind of tough if you want to create a field of great races. Put like people together. You have a whole race of 4,300-meter runners. They're all going to have a slow start and they're all going to have a fast finish, but they're going to be fighting the whole way down the track. You put a whole list of 44s out there. We're all going to have a pretty good start. We're all going to have great top speed, and we're all going to decelerate at the finish. But it's whoever set up the race better is going to win, and that's what the sport is. And so I think combining and switching things like that causes it just yeah, okay, cool, you get to see a good finish, but at the end of the day it changes the sport up a little bit. So I think they've made it harder on themselves trying to change the system. I think they should have just completely separated it and just leave it at that. But their decisions that they've made have been, I think, based on a lot of people's opinions and GBs and conversations, and so it is what it is now. As far as scrapping all the world records, it's unfortunate because there's a lot of current athletes that are world record holders. They're going to be, um, you know, hurt potentially by this, but I also think that they've also got a new chance to wipe the slate clean and start from scratch and reset some records. So it's a bummer, but at the same time, it's I'd say for athletes that aren't running anymore, I think if they're on the record list, that's a hard pill to swallow. But for those that are competitive here and now, it can be kind of a refreshing opportunity. So just kind of depends on which way you look at it.
I think the way you raise it, it's probably the one that is the most difficult to explain to probably the larger population as to why the categories combined. Off the top of my head, I think it's the only Paralympic sport that you'll see it done. Nobody else will do it. You're thinking, well, like you say, their reasoning historically, you can understand it because with the technological advancements, the double amputee would have been always slower anyway. But now with them being, and this is my personal opinion now, them being able to manipulate their height, they're going to have, until that new ruling came in, they're always going to have supremacy, because if you can make yourself taller, in theory, you could be faster than an able-bodied person because it doesn't respond like a normal limb would do. If it's gaining more, like you're saying, you're gaining more top speed towards the end of the race. Well, you've got no chance.
Yeah, that's right. And I would take it even a step further than that, James, and say that not only is the potential to manipulate height, and I think the IPC's tried to somewhat regulate that, but they're allowed to do something unique that unilateral amputees don't have access to, and able bodies do to a certain extent, but they're allowed to have asymmetry. So you take two of the exact same blades that are designed to propel, they're designed to spring, to explode someone down the track, and you give them two of them that are allowing them to be asymmetrical in that sense. Then you put them in the right hands of of an educated user, and there's a potential to do some superhuman things. It doesn't take away from the fact that these athletes that are using these blades are doing unbelievable amounts of training, and have to have these amazing ability of strength and core and proprioception and spatial awareness, and it's an absolute amazing athletic feat. But you are playing with technology. You are playing with the potential to propel yourself in a way. Liam was, had a pretty loud rhetoric while during the London 2017 game, saying he's going to be faster than Usain Bolt. And what he's saying is, I'm not going to train hard to beat Usain Bolt. I'm going to pay or hope a company builds $1 million legs to allow me to be jet propelled down a track. I mean, they've got cars that are faster than Usain Bolt. So at this point, we're not playing with, a human ability. We're playing with technology. And so it's, that's been, kind of put me off a little bit, because the reality is training and effort and human spirit is greater than technology all over. And that's what Paralympic and Olympic sport is about. It's human effort. It's testing your body. It's pushing it to the limits. It's not, well, I can't do that, so I'm going to get a device that's going to allow me to do that so I can be better. And that's where I draw the line, and where my frustration potentially is when it comes to, the regulation aspect of things. Because if you let technology continue to move forward, I believe that, people with disabilities need to have the resources to live a normal life. But at the same time, on a competitive scale, there is a line of, effort, training, hard work, and then robotics.
Well, he kind of came out of nowhere as well last year. You're thinking, who's this brash young man, even over here, and not being involved in the movement. It's like it was quite funny in terms of I'm just going to turn up and see what happens. But you think when he got, it's probably, you would say he was at the start of the meet probably quite introverted, but then is it him playing an act, and he's obviously now become, off the back of it, got notoriety to some extent and become more famous, and he is more outspoken? Or is it a bit like you could probably say on par with LeVar Ball, and you say like outlandish statements just to get in the media? So it's quite a difficult one. Is it what line does he follow? And like you were saying, in terms of the technology, it's it was a massive article when last year with doping, like technology doping. It's probably, you could, I won't say it's as bad as actual doping itself, but it's probably like a fine line of, like you were saying, if you're not going to train and you're going to use technology to kind of be better than the field, well, it's definitely going away from its actual core values of the Paralympics, because the developing countries, like we were saying off air, have got no hope in hell then, because they haven't got the resources financially to be able to go out there and get the latest technology.
Yeah, well, I definitely, I want to say, Liam's been around since 2011. He ran at the World Championships in Christchurch in 2011, and I know he took some time off, but he trained his ass off and got himself in a position to do what he did in Rio. That wasn't, if you look at his height, he didn't jack his height up to its maximum. He ran on blades that allowed him to be asymmetrical, and that's great. But he worked his butt off and earned and deserved every medal that he ran in Rio. And I think what you said, he saw it as a great opportunity. He was a little bit more on the introverted side, and he became extremely extroverted near the end of that event, and has used that in a magnificent way to build a name and a brand for himself. The part that kind of put me off a little bit was when he ran 1090 won, I think, in the prelims, which is the first time he's ever gone under 11 seconds. And then 2 months later, he says he's going to run 9.4 faster than Usain Bolt. He still hasn't beat every Paralympic athlete yet, and he's taken a shot at Usain Bolt. So would I say that was to build a brand and create a name and some spark? Yeah, absolutely. Because, 10, 9 and 9.4, that's 1.5 seconds. That's a large margin there. The fastest amputee to ever run was 10:56 Alon in 2013 in the Olympic Stadium with two prosthetic blades. So he's saying he's going to run 1.2 seconds faster than that. So, I definitely think that, if the statement would have been a little bit more tangible or close to something he's done, I might take him a little bit more face value. But, it's obvious that was a political stunt. It was a media stunt, and he's made it pretty clear that it's going to be technologically driven. And so, that's not what the Paralympic movement's about.
Well, I know it's kind of, it's a gray area now in terms of how you would define the Paralympic movement, because there's always been talk of, like the merger of the two games. You're thinking, well, that would, if you did that, you kind of going away from its core values of being, well, wheelchair use technically at the beginning, and what the Olympics would take would be the upper echelons of the event. So it'd be probably the more acceptable things in society. So say amputees, visually impaired, and the things of that one. So, and everything else would probably get chucked in the garbage. So it's thinking, well, as opposed to that, I'd probably say, I see no reason why they couldn't expand the Paralympics, because, as you know, the accommodation's there and it's not used to its full capacity. Well, in most cases, it's not used to its full capacity. There's still room for more athletes to be there. And I think with television coverage getting better, there's probably still more. It's probably, you can test it. Obviously, the US is that much further behind us over here in the UK. And as a British athlete, I could say, well, there's still long scope to go in terms of it being on par with the Olympic athletes. And you're thinking, well, we jokingly, I kind of joke with general public where I live, when they saw the Olympic team has done well in the games. Yeah, and the Paralympic team probably beat that in the first week, like the medal total. So it's and I can back that statement up, because I know I might be joking and like jovially saying that, but as long as the athletes perform, that's fact. So
that's right.
So it's a difficult one in terms of people say, oh, there was good coverage. Not really. It depended on, I'd say it was predominantly, if you were in the big, I'm going to say the big three, big four, so say athletics, swimming, cycling, or what would be the fourth one? I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but they were obviously emphasis on that predominantly. You're thinking, well, my mom brought up a good point with like sporting events. Why don't, say, like the international broadcasters, be it, well, which yourself, NBC, MBNC, and things like that, pay the host broadcaster to only show their own athlete, and that's obviously, well, it wouldn't be as large a spectacle, but you would then get to see your countrymen compete, and probably. But then I probably argued to that, well, it was probably, she was saying the ones that are likely to do well. Yeah, but there are things that come out of nowhere sometimes and win medals, and that might be an event they don't pick up. But it's one way to probably get it to a larger audience that way, because then you're focusing primarily on the events that you're competing in, as opposed to trying to show everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think the I've said this for a few years. I think the first step we need to do as the Paralympic movement is to distance ourselves from the Olympics. I think trying to align ourselves with them is our biggest Achilles heel. We're trying to be like a brand that's done pretty well, but why don't we do better than that brand? What successful business that says, "Oh, look, they do it really well. Let's be just like them." No one. The successful business says, "Hey, these guys do it really well. Let's do it better than them, and let's do it in a new way, and let's do it fresh." And that's where I feel like the Paralympic Committee has a huge flaw, and our mindset is mediocrity. And so we're going to continue to elicit mediocre coverage, mediocre, support and resources and finances and all those things, until we say, hey, we are going to be a great standalone movement. We're going to do things better than the Olympics. We don't want to be the Olympics because we are the Paralympics. I think that you hear this rhetoric of Paralympic pride, and you hear it, but you don't see it. You've got to the point where you've got athletes, the best athletes in your movement are saying they want to leave and compete against, able-bodied athletes. And it's like, wait a second. Do you see Usain Bolt saying he wants to fly to Mars to race aliens because there's no one on the planet to beat him? No, he's proud of being the fastest man in the world. And he gets the recognition he deserves. Why? Because they built a brand that's allowed him to do that. I think the Paralympics has the same opportunity. They're just not taking it.
I think that's going to be a difficult one. It's going to be to see, well, I won't say the Olympic movement, but to see what athletics does when Usain Bolt decides to retire. Who will then, you can't say step into his shoes, but kind of be that figurehead, kind of poster boy for the athletics. So that one will be, because he's kind of obviously grabbed it by the coattails and brought it out of doping allegations and whatnot, and kind of made it kind of sexy again in terms of he's very much a showman and things like that. Obviously, within the UK, I think because of the coverage in London, a lot of that, more so, or Johnny Peacock, Hannah Cockcroft, and etc. I know I'm probably forgetting loads and loads of people. You got the likes of David Weir. They are household names in the UK. They are probably on par with most Olympic athletes, if not higher than that. And people would probably say, "Oh, if you saw a poster, that's so and so." Whereas in the past, it's like you said, it's been a second-class citizen.
Yeah, I think the IAAF and athletics is really excited that Wayne Van Niekerk came on board last year and blew up because I think he's going to be a quick, easy, soft transition for Bolt's retirement. There's a lot of great athletes. You look at Michael Johnson back in the day. He kind of had that same vibe and feel. And upon his retirement, Trek didn't go anywhere. New names came up, and maybe we didn't see performances like that were elicited by him for a long time, 20-something years before it got broken. And Bolts is going to stand for a very, very long time. But I think the sport itself is competitive enough and strong enough to withstand. And I think the same thing is true for Paralympics. And even a handful of the names that you've spoken are great proof of that. And that's just from Great Britain. So you take all the other great athletes in the world. I mean, goodness gracious, Akeem Stewart, Trinidad and Tobago, standing, throws a javelin 60 meters. I mean, it's ridiculous. Some of the things that are happening inside Paralympic sports. So you show some of that, and on a larger scale, and whether you understand athletics or not, it can be something that you can fall in love with. But again, I think the biggest issue in Paralympics, I would say there's two major issues. I think the first issue is they don't believe that they can become a household name, and they respond in that manner. They're happy to hang on to the coattail of the Olympics, and until they separate, until they have the desire to take that risk, they're going to stay in that manner. And then the second thing is it's pretty confusing. There's a lot of different disabilities, and there's a lot of combined classifications, and until they make it a little bit more cookie cutter, a little bit more self-explanatory, the coverage in London has done a great job doing explanations and having really good blurbs on television to help the audience understand that. But until we can make it a little bit more cut and dry, it's going to be hard for the public to understand what's happening.
That's a difficult one, because I got asked number of years, why is so and so in this classification in athletics? It's like I've got
Right.
no idea.
Right.
If it's not your discipline, you can't explain it as to, well, because it'll be, I don't know, it'd be amputees running with people with four limbs. Thinking, okay, I would think maybe he's got neurological
Hmm.
damage to some extent. I don't know. It's if it's not in my discipline, I
Yeah.
don't know the ins and outs of the classification system. It's well, even within your own sport, it's a minefield as it is. It's like, if that's the classification I'm in, and that's not. I would kind of argue with that argument. Uh, you can obviously appeal your your classification, but then if
Right.
once that appeal goes through and they decide it's that's what it is, and things like that. But it's like you were saying, with getting people that are figureheads. I don't know, with the invention of likes of, I don't know, Facebook, Twitter. You were saying somebody's thrown a javelin standing 60 meters. Well, in theory, that should go viral.
I agree, man. No, I agree, and I think that um, social media is an interesting game. One person can make a YouTube video doing the dumbest things in the world and get millions of hits all over the place. It's very confusing. Um, you know, my agent jokes about that all the time. He's like, I don't understand. I've got these amazing athletes doing these great things, both able-bodied and Paralympic alike, and, can't get any traction because we got, these guys over here taking videos of them, trying to do a flip off a bridge and they fall, belly flop and get a billion hits. It's just, I don't understand what the population wants. And I think I think that's part of it too. And I think that's part of the struggle with creating Paralympic awareness is what does the population want to see, and how can we, create that, you know, fill that void and create that space and fill that space with Paralympic sport. It's tough.
Well, I think it comes down to, well, when you say people making a fool out of themselves, I think everybody likes to see somebody get hurt when it's not them. But in terms of, I don't know, getting exploits out there, it's very difficult in terms of sporting excellence, because unless it's, I don't know, a miraculous feat, it's I've seen that before. It's nothing. Well, I won't say it's nothing special,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
I can't say, or I choose not to run, but I can't do the things that you do. So I'd probably stand up and admire that, because it's something I can't achieve. But then I'm probably of that mindset where I can respect what you've done, and that kind of tribulation you've got from getting from point A to point B and everything
Right.
in between. Obviously, until I read your bio, I'd kind of seen the sporting side of things and kind of don't think of, okay, what's your life before that? So it kind of opened my eyes. And like you were discussing on this episode, it's you've had a number of factors that you don't bring up even on the website that you've had to overcome. So it's humbling in that regard. That I think probably athletes in general, you kind of put it into not boxes, but it's kind of a sporting mentality where this is, if we use the Olympic cycle as the analogy, if it's in that block, it's in the past. I can't do anything about it. You got to move forward. So it's kind of that when you've kind of, and I probably use it as well. It's that you don't dwell upon past successes. It's in this box. If you want to discuss it, we can. But I'm not going to boast about what I've done in the past. It's okay. I don't mind other people doing it. Oh, that's all well and good, because I don't say it gives me an ego boost, but it kind of, you kind of take pride on what you do, but you don't like to come across as kind of quite egotistical in that way. Oh, I've done this, or this is what have you achieved? A kind of mentality.
Yeah, I mean, I think I view my past as a roadmap to what's gotten me to where I am today. And I view that roadmap as a potential to motivate and encourage people, not to magnify me. So, my desire for the things that the successes that I've had in the past, the obstacles that I've overcome, are not to say, look what I've done, what are you doing, but to say, hey, I've been, I went through this and I was able to come out the other side and overcome this. I hope that this can, it motivates you to, not look at your circumstance as a roadblock, but maybe as a toll booth, saying, hey, I'm going to have to stop through here for a second and I may have to pay a little bit of a fee, but I'm going to be able to drive out of here on the other side, in a manner that maybe is different. I can leave a little bit of the past behind and move forward. So that's kind of how I view the circumstances and situations that I've been in. And again, I don't want to rest in and boast about, well, hey, remember I did this, remember look what I've done there. It's like, no, hey, like that's great. And that's another part of my story. And if it at any point something like that encourages and motivates people, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take every opportunity that I'm given, and learn from it, and use it to help sharpen me and allow me to continue to move forward on endeavors and that I want to go down.
And last question, Jarryd, before we wrap up the episode. If you had to summarize this episode into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
I would say an enlightening inside perspective on Paralympic sport, and the journey of one athlete that has gone through his story and lived his story. But I'm sure every other Paralympic athlete and athletes alike can echo and parallel their stories along similar experiences.
So thanks for sharing your story on the Mindset Game podcast.
James, thanks for having me, man. It was awesome.
It's my pleasure. And for everybody, this show will be aired every week. So until next time, I will see you guys soon.